Isaac Carter didn't raise his voice when he dragged Bella out. That was what made it worse. The charity hall fell quiet, not out of respect, but recognition. His hand locked around her wrist. She was 7 months pregnant. He didn't slow down. "Stop pretending," he said just loud enough. "You don't contribute anything." No one stepped in. Bella didn't resist. She didn't speak. What none of them knew, what Isaac never cared to ask, was that the woman he was removing like an inconvenience had already built something he could never control. And tonight would cost him everything. If you believe silence doesn't mean weakness, stay with this story until the end. And before we go on, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I read every single one. Subscribe if you value stories where dignity speaks louder than noise. From the outside, the Carter marriage had always made sense. They lived in a quiet, carefully curated neighborhood just outside of Boston. One of those places where the lawns were always trimmed, the windows always clean, and the people always watching without appearing to. Their home stood at the end of a cul-de-sac wrapped in soft gray siding and understated wealth. Nothing about it was loud. Nothing about it needed to be. Isaac Carter preferred it that way. He was the kind of man who understood presentation before substance and had built a life that reflected that instinct with precision. His suits were tailored but never flashy. His smile appeared easily in public but rarely lasted in private. He worked in corporate finance mid-level, stable, respectable, and spoke often about discipline structure and knowing your place in a system. It was a phrase Bella had heard more than once. To most people, Isaac was dependable. To his colleagues, he was composed. To his mother, Lydia Carter, he was evidence of good upbringing and proper priorities. Lydia often said with a satisfied tilt of her chin that Isaac had married down in temperament but up in stability. Bella had heard that too. She never corrected it. Bella Carter did not speak often in social settings. She attended when necessary, stood when expected, and listened far more than anyone noticed. Her presence was easy to overlook unless someone paid very close attention, which almost no one did. But Bella noticed everything. She noticed how Isaac's tone changed depending on who entered the room, how his laughter was calibrated, how he interrupted people who disagreed with him but praised those who didn't. She noticed the pauses between his words when he was calculating how something would be perceived. And she noticed how invisible she had become inside her own life. It had not happened suddenly. There had been no singular moment where Bella Carter disappeared. Instead, it was a slow erosion layer by layer, assumption by assumption, until what remained was a version of her that fit neatly into Isaac's narrative. Quiet wife, expecting mother, financially dependent, safe. That was the word Isaac used once in a conversation with his friend Mark Benson over dinner. "Bella's safe," he had said, cutting into his steak without looking at her. "She doesn't complicate things." Mark had nodded not unkindly, but without question. "That's rare." Bella had smiled then, not because she agreed, but because she understood the function of the moment. Agreement wasn't required, only appearance. Across the table, Lydia had added stability matters more than ambition in a household, especially for a woman in her position. Her position. Bella remembered that phrase with particular clarity. She had written it down later that night in a small, unmarked notebook she kept tucked inside the back of her closet. The notebook contained no emotional reflections, no confessions, no visible hurt. Only records. Dates, times, statements, patterns. She did not label them. She did not explain them. She simply kept them. At 7 months pregnant, Bella moved more slowly than she used to, but her mind had never been sharper. Every physical limitation had sharpened something internal, something precise and controlled. Isaac interpreted her quiet as fragility. He was wrong. In the mornings, their house followed a rhythm that appeared ordinary. Isaac would leave early, always with the same sequence: coffee, email check, brief nod in Bella's direction, and then the door closing with measured finality. Bella would remain, She would wait until the house settled fully into silence before moving through her own routine. It was not the routine Isaac imagined. There were no long hours of idle rest, no passive waiting. Instead, Bella's mornings were structured around windows of time. A call placed at exactly 9:10 a.m., never earlier, never later. Always taken from the small study at the back of the house door, closed voice low. "Morning, Daniel," she would say. Daniel Reeves never wasted words. "We're aligned on the revised structure. I'll send the updated documents within the hour." Bella would pause, listening not just to the words, but to what remained unsaid. "Keep Clara looped in," she would reply. Always. The call would end. Minutes later, another message would arrive, this one encrypted, routed through channels Isaac would not recognize, even if he saw them. Bella would review it carefully, not rushing, not reacting. Numbers, timelines, movement. Clara Nguyen's updates were always precise. Projection adjusted, valuation holding. Bella would read each line once, then again. She never responded immediately. She let information settle before acting. It was a habit that had saved her more than once. From the outside, these moments did not exist. To Isaac, Bella spent her mornings resting, preparing for the baby, maintaining the house. He believed this not because he had verified it, but because it fit the structure he had already accepted as truth. And Isaac rarely questioned truths that benefited him. There had been signs, of course. There were always signs. A notification once appearing on Bella's phone with a subject line that didn't match anything domestic. A document briefly visible on her screen before she closed it. A conversation he overheard halfway and dismissed entirely. Each time Isaac chose the simpler explanation: irrelevance. It was easier to believe Bella had nothing than to consider the possibility that she had something he couldn't access. So he never asked, and Bella never offered. In the afternoons, she would sometimes sit by the window in the living room, one hand resting lightly against the curve of her stomach, the other holding that same unmarked notebook. She did not write often, only when necessary. A sentence spoken in passing, a financial inconsistency mentioned without care, a shift in tone that suggested something deeper beneath the surface. She was not documenting pain. She was documenting truth. There was a difference. By evening, Isaac would return carrying with him the residue of whatever pressures he had faced during the day. Some days it was nothing more than irritation, short answers distracted attention. Other days it was sharper, controlled but present. "Did you pay the utility bill?" he asked, once dropping his keys onto the counter. Bella looked up. "Yes." He nodded, already moving on. "Make sure you stay on top of those things." She did not respond. He did not notice. Dinner was often quiet. When conversation happened, it revolved around Isaac's world, his work, his frustrations, his observations about others. Bella listened. Not passively. Never passively. She listened the way someone listens when information matters, when it might be needed later. One night, Mark Benson visited again. The conversation drifted, as it often did, toward money. "You ever think about scaling up?" Mark asked Isaac. "Taking on something bigger," Isaac leaned back, considering. "I prefer control. Risk complicates things." Mark nodded. "Fair." Then, almost as an afterthought, he glanced at Bella. "What about you?" It was a rare moment, one that broke the usual pattern. Bella met his gaze briefly. "I prefer structure," she said. It was the only answer she gave. Mark smiled politely, but the conversation moved on quickly. The moment passed. Isaac didn't think about it again, but Bella did. Later that night, she added another line to her notebook, not because of what was said, but because of what was revealed. By the time the house fell quiet again, Bella had already reviewed 3 documents, responded to 2 messages, and scheduled a call for the following morning. All without leaving the room Isaac believed contained nothing of consequence. Outside, the neighborhood remained still. Lights dimmed, doors closed, lives settled into predictable patterns. Inside, something else was taking shape. Not loudly, not visibly, but with precision. And while Isaac Carter slept under the assumption that he understood the structure of his life, Bella Carter continued building one he had never been invited to see. Bella Carter had never been drawn to noise. Even before the marriage, before the house at the end of the cul-de-sac, before her name became something spoken in smaller and smaller ways, she had preferred systems over attention. Not because she lacked the ability to stand in the center of a room, but because she understood what happened to people who relied on being seen. They became predictable. And predictability in Bella's experience was a liability. Years earlier, long before Isaac had reduced her to something safe, Bella had been known for something else entirely. In a different city, under a different set of expectations, she had built a reputation for solving problems that did not present themselves clearly. She did not approach complexity with urgency. She approached it with patience. While others tried to move faster, Bella focused on moving correctly. It was during that time that she first encountered Daniel Reeves. He had been recommended quietly, the way certain names always are passed, from one careful conversation to another. Never written down, never broadcast. A corporate attorney with a reputation for building structures that held under pressure, Daniel did not advertise. He did not need to. Bella had met him in a glass-walled conference room overlooking a part of the city that never seemed to sleep. "You're not here for visibility," Daniel had said after reviewing the initial documents she brought. It wasn't a question. Bella had taken a moment before answering. No. He had studied her, not in the way people often did, trying to place her within a category, but in a way that suggested he was mapping something less obvious. "Then we build differently," he said. And they did. What Bella wanted was not a company in the traditional sense, not something that required her name on a door, not something that depended on her presence to function. She wanted something that could operate independently of perception, something that could grow without becoming exposed. Something resilient. The early days were not dramatic. There were no grand announcements, no public launches, no carefully curated press. There were only long hours of quiet work, structured decisions, and a series of calculated risks taken at exactly the right moments. Bella did not try to do everything herself. She selected carefully. Clara Nguyen had been one of those selections. At the time, Clara was working in a financial role that did not fully utilize her ability. She understood numbers in a way that went beyond calculation. She understood behavior patterns and the subtle signals that indicated where value was actually moving. Bella had reached out with a single message. "Would you consider building something that doesn't need to be explained to everyone?" Clara's reply had come quickly. Yes. From that point forward, the foundation began to take shape. They did not build loudly. They built correctly. The company, though it rarely referred to itself that way, internally focused on enterprise-level data infrastructure. Not the kind that attracted headlines, but the kind that quietly supported systems other people relied on. Security layers, optimization frameworks, back-end architecture that, when functioning properly, remained invisible. It was the kind of work that did not invite attention, which made it valuable. Bella structured ownership through layers that were intentionally difficult to trace at a glance. Trusts holding entities' legal partitions, all designed not to obscure wrongdoing, but to protect independence. Daniel handled the legal architecture with precision. Clara managed financial movement with equal care. Bella oversaw everything, not by controlling every detail, but by ensuring that every piece fit. As the company grew, so did its value. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Contracts expanded, systems scaled, clients increased not because of marketing, but because reliability created its own form of reputation. By the time Bella met Isaac, the foundation was already in place. But Isaac never saw it. Their relationship had begun in a way that to an outside observer would appear ordinary. They met through mutual connections, shared conversations that felt easy, built something that looked stable from the beginning. Isaac appreciated structure. Bella understood it. It seemed at first compatible. But compatibility based on surface alignment rarely survives deeper examination. Bella noticed early how Isaac spoke about control not as something to be managed, but as something to be maintained. He valued predictability in people the same way he valued it in systems. He liked knowing where things stood. He liked knowing where people belonged. Bella recognized the pattern, and she made a decision, not out of fear, not out of strategy alone, but out of clarity. She would not merge her work with his perception, so she separated them completely. The legal structures Daniel had helped design made that separation possible. Ownership remained insulated. Financial flows were routed through channels that did not intersect with Bella's personal accounts in any visible way. To Isaac, there was nothing to see. And over time, that absence became confirmation. He did not question why Bella never discussed work. He did not wonder how she managed expenses without asking. He did not examine the gaps, because the gaps supported his understanding, and people rarely investigate what reassures them. After the marriage, Bella adjusted her visibility even further. Meetings were scheduled during hours Isaac was not present. Communications shifted to platforms he did not recognize. Documentation was stored in places he would never think to look, not because they were hidden, but because they did not fit into his framework of expectation. Bella did not lie. She simply did not offer information that would be misunderstood. Years passed this way, quietly, consistently. While Isaac built a life defined by perception, Bella built one defined by structure. And structure, when built correctly, does not need to announce itself. It reveals itself only when necessary. Now, as Bella sat in the dim light of the study, one hand resting against the steady curve of her pregnancy, the other scrolling through a series of updated reports, the scale of what she had built was no longer theoretical. It was measurable. Clara's latest message was concise as always. Valuation confirmed. Conservative estimate holds at 300. Bella read the line once, then again, not because she doubted it, but because she understood what it meant. $300 million did not change who she was. But it changed what could be protected. It changed what could be left untouched. Across the room, her phone remained silent for a moment before lighting up again. This time, the message came from Daniel. We should discuss timing. Bella set the phone down briefly, allowing the thought to settle before responding. Timing. It was always about timing. Not when something became true, but when it became visible. Outside the study, the house remained quiet, predictable, controlled. Isaac was still at work, still operating under the assumption that the structure of his life remained intact, that nothing significant existed beyond what he could see. Bella did not rush to correct that assumption. She simply continued preparing for the moment when it would no longer hold. And when that moment came, it would not arrive with noise. It would arrive with documentation, with signatures, with records that could not be argued away. Bella Carter had never needed to be seen to build something real. And by the time anyone thought to look closely, it would already be too late to change what she had created. The first time Isaac humiliated Bella in public, no one called it that. They called it tension, a misunderstanding, a moment. It happened at Lydia Carter's house during a small dinner that had been described as informal, though nothing Lydia hosted was ever truly without structure. The table was set with deliberate symmetry, the lighting softened just enough to suggest warmth without inviting comfort. Everything had its place, including Bella. She sat to Isaac's right as expected. Lydia sat at the head. Mark Benson arrived 10 minutes late, apologizing with a smile that suggested he knew it wouldn't matter. Dinner began with quiet conversation updates, observations, polite exchanges that never strayed too far from neutral ground. Bella listened as she always did, noting the cadence of voices, the subtle shifts in tone. It started when Lydia asked a simple question. "So, Bella," she said, lifting her glass slightly before setting it back down, "have you thought about what you'll do after the baby arrives?" The question itself was not unusual, but the way it was asked, measured, public positioned, was not accidental. Bella paused briefly, placing her fork down before answering. I haven't made any announcements yet. It was a careful response, neutral, open-ended. Isaac exhaled softly beside her, a sound that carried just enough weight to draw attention. You don't need to make announcements, he said. You'll be home. His tone was light, almost casual. But there was something beneath it, something that didn't invite disagreement. Lydia nodded approvingly. That would be the sensible choice. Bella did not immediately respond. She looked at Isaac, not challengingly, not defensively, but directly. I'll make the decision when it's time, she said. It was a simple sentence, but it introduced something unfamiliar into the room. Autonomy. Isaac smiled then, but it wasn't the same smile he used in public settings. This one was tighter controlled. There's nothing to decide, he said. Let's be realistic. Mark shifted slightly in his chair, sensing the change, but not intervening. Bella reached for her glass of water, her movements steady. I am, she replied. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Isaac leaned back in his chair, letting out a short laugh. Realistic, he repeated. Bella, you don't even have a job. The words landed cleanly, too cleanly. Lydia didn't react immediately. Mark looked down at his plate. The air shifted, not dramatically, but enough. Bella felt the weight of the sentence, but not in the way Isaac expected. She didn't absorb it. She observed it. The phrasing, the timing, the audience. Isaac had chosen this moment deliberately, not to clarify, but to define. Bella did not defend herself. She did not correct him. Instead, she asked a question. What do you consider a job? She said. Isaac's smile returned, but it carried a sharper edge now. Something that contributes, he replied. Lydia added quietly, financially. There it was, defined, framed, reinforced. Bella nodded once as if acknowledging the structure of the argument rather than its validity. I see, she said, and that was all. The conversation moved on, but not cleanly. There was a residue now, something unspoken, but present. Mark attempted to redirect the discussion towards safer topics. Lydia allowed it, but her earlier satisfaction had deepened into something more fixed. Isaac continued as if nothing had happened, because to him, nothing had. He had stated a truth, or what he believed to be one. Dinner ended without further incident. Plates were cleared. Polite goodbyes were exchanged. The evening dissolved back into the kind of quiet that made it easy to forget what had been said. But Bella did not forget. She never did. That night back in their house, Isaac placed his keys on the counter with the same measured motion he always used. The routine was intact. The structure remained. You were quiet, he said, not looking at her. Bella removed her coat, slowly hanging it in its place. I usually am, she replied. Isaac nodded as if confirming something. Good, he said. No need to complicate things. Bella didn't answer. She moved through the house with the same calm precision she always maintained. There was no visible tension in her movements, no indication that anything had shifted. But something had. Later, when the house had settled into silence and Isaac had gone to sleep, Bella returned to the small study at the back. She closed the door, sat down, opened the notebook. The page remained blank for a moment, as she considered what to record. Then, with steady handwriting, she wrote, Date, time, location, statement. You don't even have a job. She paused, then added context public. Witnesses present, reinforced. She did not write how it made her feel. She did not need to. Emotion was not the point. Clarity was. Bella closed the notebook and set it aside. Then she reached for her phone. The message she typed was brief. Daniel. I want to formalize separation parameters earlier than planned. She didn't send it immediately. Instead, she reviewed the sentence once more, not for wording, but for implication. Once sent, it would shift timing, not the outcome. The outcome had already been moving in a single direction for some time. But timing mattered. After a moment, she pressed send. The message delivered. Across the room, her laptop screen remained dim but active. A notification appeared quietly in the corner. Clara. Bella opened it. Investor call moved up. They want confirmation by end of quarter. Bella read the message carefully. Then she responded. Proceed. No explanation, no hesitation. Everything continued. In the days that followed, Isaac did not mention the dinner again. To him, it had resolved itself. Bella had not argued. Bella had not corrected him. Therefore, Bella had agreed. That was how Isaac understood silence. As confirmation. He did not see the pattern forming, the accumulation of statements, the alignment of records, the quiet consolidation of evidence. Because nothing had changed visibly. Bella still moved through the house the same way, still spoke in measured tones, still listened more than she talked, still appeared from every external angle exactly as she had always been. Safe, predictable, contained. But beneath that stillness, something else had begun to take shape. Not abruptly, not emotionally, but with the same precision Bella applied to everything she built. She was no longer simply observing. She was preparing, and Isaac Carter, confident in the version of reality he had constructed, continued forward without adjustment. Unaware that each word he spoke, each assumption he reinforced, was no longer disappearing into silence. It was being recorded, structured, positioned, waiting. The house did not change all at once. Nothing ever did in Bella Carter's life. Instead, the shifts came in increments, small, almost unnoticeable adjustments that over time altered the structure of everything inside it. At first, it was Isaac's tone. Not louder, not overtly hostile, just sharper. Requests became instructions. Instructions became expectations. Expectations, when unmet, even slightly, turned into quiet disapproval that lingered longer than necessary. Did you review the insurance documents, he asked one evening, standing in the doorway of the kitchen. Bella was seated at the table, a glass of water untouched beside her. Her posture was steady, one hand resting lightly against her stomach. I saw them, she said. Isaac waited. She did not elaborate. You need to stay on top of these things, he continued. We can't afford mistakes right now. Bella nodded once. There won't be any. It should have ended there. But Isaac remained in the doorway, watching her, in a way that suggested he was looking for something, confirmation perhaps, or contradiction. When neither appeared, he exhaled and turned away. Moments like that became more frequent. Not confrontations, corrections. Bella noticed the pattern immediately. Isaac was not reacting to her behavior. He was reacting to something else, something external, that had begun to press against the boundaries of his control. It appeared first in fragments. A call he took in the hallway, voice lowered, but not enough to hide the tension. I told you, that wasn't part of the agreement. A pause. No, that's not acceptable. Another pause. Oh, I'll handle it. Bella did not move. She did not listen more closely. She simply marked the moment. Later that night, after Isaac had gone to sleep, she opened her notebook. Date, time, call duration, tone elevated, subject financial disagreement inferred. She did not speculate further. She didn't need to. The pattern would reveal itself. And it did. Over the next 2 weeks, Isaac's routine shifted in subtle but consistent ways. He stayed later at work, checked his phone more frequently, reviewed documents at the dining table without explaining what they were. Once Bella passed by, just as he quickly closed a spreadsheet. The movement was instinctive, not because he believed she understood what she saw, but because somewhere beneath his certainty, he didn't want to be observed. Bella did not react. She continued walking. But later, when Isaac stepped out to take another call, she returned. Not to search, just to confirm. The laptop was still open. She didn't touch it. She only looked. Columns of numbers, transfers, account summaries. Not detailed enough to interpret fully, but enough to recognize instability. Bella returned to the kitchen without interruption. She did not write it down immediately. She waited. Patterns first, documentation second. By the end of the week, the pattern was clear. Isaac was not managing growth. He was containing loss. That distinction mattered. On Friday afternoon, Bella received a message from Clara. Timing matters. If we move now, valuation strengthens. Bella read the message twice. The implication was obvious. Momentum was building, but momentum required alignment, and alignment required clarity. Bella placed her phone down and leaned back slightly in her chair, her hand resting once again over the quiet, steady movement beneath her ribs. She did not think about Isaac in that moment. Not emotionally, not personally. She thought about structure, about separation, about risk. That evening, Isaac returned earlier than usual. The shift was immediate. He moved through the house quickly, his steps heavier, his presence more pronounced. "Did you move money from the joint account?" he asked, without greeting. Bella looked up from the living room chair. "No." Isaac frowned, already pulling out his phone. "There's a discrepancy." Bella watched him for a moment. "How much?" she asked. He hesitated. "Doesn't matter." It did. And they both knew it. Bella stood slowly adjusting her balance before walking toward the kitchen. "It matters if you're asking me about it," she said. Isaac didn't respond immediately. He was scanning something on his screen. Then quietly, "It's just temporary." Bella nodded once. "I didn't move anything." Isaac looked up at her then, searching her face not for truth, but for resistance. There was none, only stillness. After a moment, he looked away. "Fine," he said. "I'll handle it." Bella didn't ask how. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what the discrepancy represented, because the answers were already forming. Later that night, after Isaac had shut himself into the study, his study, the one he believed contained the important things, Bella sat alone in the living room. Her notebook rested beside her. She opened it. Date, time, statement. "There's a discrepancy. Amount undisclosed. Behavior evasive." She paused, then added, "Pattern financial instability increasing." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Bella closed the notebook and reached for her phone. This time, she didn't message Daniel. She called. He answered on the second ring. "Bella, I need a review of potential exposure," she said. There was no greeting, no explanation. Daniel understood that tone. "I'll start tonight," he replied. "Anything specific, joint accounts, credit lines, anything connected to Isaac Carter." A brief silence. Understood. Bella ended the call. Across the house, Isaac remained behind a closed door, working through problems he believed were contained within his own sphere. He did not consider that the sphere was larger than he understood, that his decisions, his transfers, his attempts to stabilize something already slipping were visible. Not to the world, but to the one person who had never needed access to see clearly. In the days that followed, the pressure increased. Isaac became more controlled, not less. More deliberate, but also more reactive. A question about expenses, a comment about timing, a request framed as expectation, each one small, each one consistent. Bella responded the same way every time, calmly, briefly, without resistance, without agreement. To Isaac, it reinforced everything he believed, that she depended on him, that she did not understand the complexity of what he managed, that whatever instability existed, it was his to resolve, alone. Bella did not correct that belief, because correction would have changed his behavior. And Bella needed his behavior to remain exactly as it was, predictable, unexamined, documented. Meanwhile, Clara's updates continued. Investor confidence high. Structure holding. Timeline accelerating. Bella read each message with the same measured attention. She did not rush. She did not celebrate. She aligned. Everything was moving toward a point. Not dramatic, not explosive, but definitive. And as that point approached, the space inside the Carter home grew tighter, not visibly, but structurally. Two systems operating in parallel. One weakening, one strengthening, neither acknowledging the other. Yet, Isaac Carter believed he was managing a temporary disruption. Bella Carter knew she was preparing for a permanent shift. And in the quiet space between those two understandings, the foundation of everything they shared began to separate. The night Isaac Carter crossed the line did not begin with violence. It began with optics. The event was held in a restored historical hall in downtown Boston. High ceilings, polished wood, soft lighting, designed to suggest legacy and permanence. It was a charity fundraiser, the kind Isaac preferred, structured, visible, populated by people who understood how to watch each other without appearing to. Bella had not wanted to attend. Not because she was tired, though she was, but because she understood the environment. Spaces like this did not create tension. They revealed it, Isaac insisted. It's important, he said earlier that evening, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. People notice when you don't show up. Bella stood behind him, fastening the simple clasp of her dress. It was understated, designed for comfort more than impression. At 7 months pregnant, she moved carefully but not weakly. They notice patterns, she replied. Isaac met her eyes in the reflection. Exactly. He took her silence as agreement. He always did. When they arrived, the room responded the way it was supposed to. Subtle acknowledgments, measured smiles. A few hands extended toward Isaac, brief conversations initiated and concluded with efficiency. Bella remained beside him, present but unobtrusive. She noticed everything. The way Isaac positioned himself slightly ahead of her in conversations, the way introductions were framed. This is my wife, Bella. No further context, no expansion, no question. She was included, but not defined. The evening moved forward in controlled segments, greeting speeches, quiet networking. Waitstaff passed between clusters of conversation, collecting empty glasses and replacing them with full ones. Bella declined wine. Isaac did not comment. At first, the shift came gradually. A conversation Isaac had been waiting for two men from an investment firm, their tone polite but firm. Bella stood close enough to hear, far enough to remain outside the exchange. We need clarity before moving forward, one of them said. Isaac's posture remained steady, but Bella noticed the slight tightening in his jaw. You'll have it, he replied. You said that last quarter. A pause. Things have adjusted. The second man glanced briefly toward Bella, then back to Isaac. We're not concerned with adjustments. We're concerned with consistency. The conversation ended without resolution. Isaac smiled as they left, but the smile did not reach his eyes. Bella did not speak. She didn't need to. The pattern had already been established. Later, as the room grew louder and conversations overlapped, Isaac's movements became sharper. He moved from one group to another with increasing urgency, his composure intact but strained. Bella remained where she was, unless he signaled otherwise. At one point, she stepped aside toward a quieter section of the hall near a row of tall windows overlooking the city. She placed a hand against the glass, not for support, but for stillness. Her phone vibrated softly in her hand. Clara, final confirmation needed tonight. Bella read the message once. Then again, timing, always timing. She began typing a response. Yes, proceed with Bella. Isaac's voice cut through the moment, not loud, but sharp enough to interrupt. She turned. He was standing a few feet away, expression controlled, but unmistakably tense. Where did you go? He asked. I stepped aside, she said. For what? The question carried weight beyond its wording. Bella held his gaze. For a moment. Isaac glanced at her phone. Who are you texting? The question was new. Not because of curiosity, but because of suspicion. Bella lowered the phone slightly. It's handled, she said. Isaac's expression tightened. What is? There was a pause. Not long, but enough. Something that doesn't involve you, Bella replied. It was the most direct sentence she had spoken to him in weeks, and it disrupted something. Isaac stepped closer. Don't do that, he said. Do what, that tone? Bella did not respond. Around them, the room continued, voices, movement, controlled laughter. No one was watching directly, but the space between them had shifted. Isaac reached for her wrist. Not violently, but firmly. Come on, he said. We're leaving. Bella did not resist. She allowed the movement not as compliance, but as calculation. As Isaac guided her through the room, the dynamic changed. People noticed, not because of volume, but because of precision. The way his hand remained on her wrist, the way she moved without speaking, the absence of explanation. Near the exit, someone spoke. "Everything all right?" Isaac didn't slow. "Perfect," he said. Bella said nothing. The doors opened. The night air was colder than expected. Isaac didn't stop walking until they reached the edge of the building, away from immediate view. Then he released her. "What was that?" he asked. Bella adjusted her balance slightly, one hand instinctively moving to her stomach. "What was what?" she replied. Isaac exhaled sharply. "That attitude, that message. You think this is a game." Bella looked at him, not defensively, not emotionally. Clearly. "I think you're under pressure," she said. The statement was neutral, but it landed differently. Isaac laughed, once short. "You have no idea what pressure is." Bella didn't respond. He stepped closer again. "You stand there doing nothing, contributing nothing, and suddenly you have things that don't involve me." There it was. Repetition, reinforcement. Public words now echoed in private. Bella remained still. "I didn't say that," she replied. "You implied it. I answered your question." Isaac shook his head. "This is exactly what I mean. You complicate things for no reason." Bella took a breath, slow, measured. "I'm not complicating anything," she said. Isaac looked at her for a long moment. Then, without warning, he reached for her again, this time, pulling her forward toward the street. "Let's go," he said. The movement was abrupt, not explosive, but final. Bella followed not because she agreed, but because resistance would change nothing in that moment. A couple near the entrance turned as they passed. Someone else paused mid-conversation. It was enough witnesses, enough context, enough visibility. Isaac didn't notice, or didn't care. At the curb, he stopped. "You're going home," he said, "and you're staying there." Bella met his eyes. "I wasn't planning to go anywhere else." Isaac released her arm. "Good." He turned slightly, already pulling out his phone again, attention shifting back to whatever problem he believed required control. Bella stood still for a moment. Then quietly she stepped back. Not toward him, away. He didn't notice immediately. When he did, it was already too late to redefine the moment. "Bella," he said, turning. She was a few steps away now, not far, but enough. "I'll handle the rest of the night," she said. Isaac frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Bella replied, her voice steady, "this is where I leave." There was no emotion in the sentence, no anger, no urgency, only clarity. Isaac stared at her, trying to understand what had shifted, but the structure he relied on no longer applied. Bella turned and walked, not quickly, not dramatically, but with direction. Behind her, Isaac Carter remained where he was standing, under the soft glow of a streetlight, phone in hand control, slipping in ways he did not yet recognize. Unaware that the moment he believed had reinforced his authority had instead marked the exact point where he lost it. Bella did not look back. Not at the entrance of the hall, not at the streetlight where Isaac remained, not at the version of her life that had just been left behind without announcement. She walked until the noise of the event faded into distance, replaced by the quieter rhythm of the city at night. Distant traffic muted footsteps, the low hum of something continuous and indifferent. Her breathing stayed even. Her pace measured. There was no urgency in her movement, only direction. 2 blocks away, a car was already waiting. It was not a coincidence. Bella opened the rear door and stepped inside without hesitation. "Miss Carter," the driver said, glancing briefly in the rearview mirror. Bella nodded. "Thank you, Marcus." Marcus didn't ask questions. He had been hired precisely because he didn't need context to follow instruction. "Location confirmed?" he asked. "Yes." The car pulled away from the curb, smoothly merging into traffic without drawing attention. Bella leaned back slightly, one hand resting against her abdomen. The city lights passed in quiet streaks across the window beside her. For a moment, she closed her eyes, not out of exhaustion, but to recalibrate. The shift had happened. Not emotionally, structurally. Her phone vibrated once. "Daniel, are you safe?" Bella opened her eyes and typed a response. "Yes, in transit." The reply came almost immediately. "Rachel is ready. We can begin as soon as you arrive." Bella didn't answer right away. She looked out the window again, watching as the familiar streets gave way to something less recognizable, not because the city had changed, but because her position within it had. She was no longer moving between roles. She was moving into alignment. 20 minutes later, the car turned into a quieter street lined with modern apartment buildings. Clean lines controlled access anonymity built into design. Marcus pulled to a stop in front of one of them. "We're here." Bella stepped out the night air cooler, now sharper. "Thank you," she said. Marcus nodded once before driving away. Inside the lobby was quiet. A security desk, softly lit. A man in a dark suit glanced up as she entered. "Good evening, Miss Carter." Bella nodded. "Good evening." He did not ask for identification. He did not need to. She moved toward the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor. The ride up was silent. When the doors opened, Rachel Stein was already waiting. She stood just inside the open apartment door, posture straight, expression composed. "Bella," she said. Rachel's tone carried no surprise, only readiness. Bella stepped inside. The apartment was fully furnished, but impersonal neutral tones, minimal decoration designed for function rather than comfort. A space prepared in advance, not inhabited in the traditional sense. Rachel closed the door behind her. "Sit," she said gently, gesturing toward the living area. Bella did, lowering herself carefully into the chair nearest the window. Rachel didn't begin with questions. She began with observation. "You're steady," she said. Bella met her eyes. "I am." Rachel nodded once. "Good." She moved to the table, opening a folder already laid out with precision. "We'll keep this structured," Rachel continued. "No assumptions, only what we can document." Bella inclined her head slightly. "Understood." Rachel sat across from her. "Start with tonight," she said. Bella didn't recount it emotionally. She didn't describe how it felt. She described what happened. Location, public event. Multiple witnesses. He initiated physical contact, gripped my wrist, directed movement without consent. Rachel wrote quickly, efficiently. Duration less than a minute inside. Continued outside. Any verbal statements? Bella paused briefly. Yes. She repeated Isaac's words exactly. No additions, no interpretation. Rachel noted them. Witnesses, yes. Identifiable some. Rachel nodded again. We'll request footage from the venue, she said. Security cameras, entry points, any available angles. Bella didn't respond. Rachel continued. Medical Bella's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. No injury, she said. But I want documentation. Good, Rachel replied. We'll have Dr. Harris assess and record. It matters. Bella understood that. Not as a precaution, as evidence. Rachel flipped to the next page. Now financial exposure. Bella's gaze remained steady. I want separation initiated immediately, she said. Rachel didn't hesitate. We can file for protective measures by morning, she said. But I need full clarity. You'll have it. Rachel watched her for a moment. Daniel has already started reviewing your structures, she added. Everything you've built remains insulated. Bella nodded. I expected that. Rachel leaned back slightly. Isaac doesn't know, she said. It wasn't a question. No, Bella replied. Good. The word held weight. Not approval, positioning. Rachel closed the folder for a moment, studying Bella with a level of attention few people ever applied to her. You understand what happens next, she said. Bella did. But she waited. Rachel continued. This is not about confrontation, she said. It's about sequence. Bella's expression didn't change. Evidence first, Rachel said. Then action. Then disclosure only where necessary. Bella nodded. That aligns. Rachel's tone softened just slightly. You've already done most of the work, she said. Now we formalize it. Across the room, Bella's phone vibrated again. Clara, documents ready, awaiting confirmation to release. Bella looked at the screen for a moment, then typed hold. Pending legal sequence. She set the phone down. Rachel noticed. That's your other structure, she said. Bella met her gaze. Yes. Rachel didn't ask for details. She didn't need them yet. What matters, Rachel said, is that everything moves in the right order. Bella understood. Timing, again, always. There was a knock at the door. Rachel stood crossing the room to open it. Dr. Emily Harris stepped inside, carrying a small case. Bella, she said warmly. Bella inclined her head. Emily. Dr. Harris approached slowly, her presence calm but attentive. I'll keep this brief, she said. Just documentation, Bella agreed. The examination was quiet, professional. No urgency, no alarm, just record. When it was done, Dr. Harris closed her case. Everything is stable, she said. But I'll file a report noting stress factors and physical handling. Bella nodded. Thank you. After she left the apartment, returned to stillness. Rachel gathered the documents, aligning them carefully. We begin in the morning, she said. Bella stood slowly, moving toward the window. Below, the city continued, unaware, unchanged. Isaac Carter was somewhere within it, still moving through his version of events, still believing he had defined the narrative. Bella rested her hand lightly against the glass. I won't respond publicly, she said. Rachel joined her at the window. You don't need to, she replied. The record will speak. Bella remained silent. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood something Isaac never had. The power did not come from being heard first. It came from being right and having the proof to make it undeniable. Behind her on the table, the first official documents were already in place. Structured, prepared, waiting. And for the first time, everything Bella had built quietly, carefully, without recognition, was no longer hidden. It was positioned. The apartment remained quiet long after midnight. Not empty, never empty, but intentionally still, as if every object inside it had been placed with the understanding that noise was unnecessary when structure was enough. Bella did not sleep. She changed into something more comfortable, moved slowly through the space, and settled at the desk near the window. The city below had softened into scattered lights and distant motion. From this height, everything appeared orderly, contained. Her laptop screen illuminated the room in a cool, controlled glow. Clara had already prepared everything. Bella opened the first document. It wasn't labeled as a company overview. It didn't need to be. The structure spoke for itself. Layered entities, tiered ownership, distributed control. At the top, where visibility mattered most, Bella Carter's name did not appear. Not directly. Instead, it existed through a sequence of legal constructs designed with precision. Trusts established years earlier. Holding companies registered across jurisdictions that valued compliance but respected discretion. Governance documents that ensured authority without exposure. Daniel Reeves had built the architecture. Bella had refined it. Clara maintained it. Together, it had grown into something that did not rely on recognition to function. A system. And now, it had reached scale. Bella scrolled further. Operational summaries, infrastructure reports, client portfolios. The company specialized in enterprise data architecture systems that didn't compete for attention, but quietly supported organizations that could not afford failure. Security frameworks, redundancy layers, performance optimization at levels most clients didn't fully understand, but depended on completely. There were no headlines attached to what they built. But there was consistency, and consistency over time translated into value. Bella opened the next file. Valuation analysis. Clara's notes were embedded in the margins, brief, precise, never overstated. Conservative estimate validated. External interest increasing. Projected range holds. Bella paused on the number. 300 million. It wasn't abstract. It wasn't aspirational. It was real. But Bella didn't react to it the way most people would. There was no satisfaction in her expression, no visible shift. Because for Bella, the number itself was never the objective. Control was, protection was, continuity was. The valuation simply confirmed that those things had been achieved. Her phone vibrated. Clara again. Board aligned. They're ready when you are. Bella leaned back slightly in her chair, letting the message settle. Ready? The word carried weight. It meant that what had been built quietly was now capable of existing publicly, if necessary. But public exposure was not the goal. Strategic visibility was. Bella typed her response slowly. Proceed with internal alignment only. No external disclosure yet. She pressed send. Across the city, Clara would understand immediately. Sequence mattered. Always. Bella closed the valuation report and opened another file. This one was different. Legal documentation, trust agreements, ownership confirmations, signature trails. Everything Daniel had constructed over the years was here layered and cross-referenced in a way that made it both complex and undeniable. Bella reviewed each section carefully, not because she doubted it, but because she needed to see it again, fully clearly, without interruption. Her name appeared where it mattered, not in places that invited attention, but in places that determined control. Primary beneficiary, controlling interest, final authority. The language was precise. It left no room for interpretation, no space for assumption, no opening for someone like Isaac to misunderstand. Bella closed the file. For a moment, she sat in silence. Then she opened a new message. Daniel, confirm full separation from marital exposure. The reply came quickly. Already verified. Nothing crosses into joint structure. Bella read the sentence twice. Nothing crosses. That had been the intention from the beginning. Not secrecy, separation. Years earlier, when she first recognized Isaac's need for control, not just over outcomes, but over perception, Bella had made a decision that most people would have found unnecessary. She had built her world beside his, not within it. At the time, it had seemed excessive. Now it was essential. Her phone vibrated again. This time it was Rachel. Filing begins at 8 a.m. I'll update you after submission. Bella responded simply. Understood. She set the phone down. The room returned to quiet. But beneath that quiet, everything was in motion. Legal processes, financial confirmations, operational alignment, each element moving according to its own timeline, but all converging toward the same point. Bella stood slowly walking toward the window. Her reflection met her in the glass, calm, composed, unchanged. 7 months pregnant, alone, but not unprepared. Behind her on the desk, the laptop screen remained open. A final notification appeared. Clara, external party requesting preliminary discussion. Major acquisition interest. Bella turned back, reading the message carefully. Acquisition? It was not unexpected. Companies like hers, stable, scalable, and visible in the right ways, did not go unnoticed forever. The question was not whether interest would come. The question was when to engage. Bella typed her response. Decline for now. Revisit post-resolution. She didn't elaborate. Clara didn't need her to. Timing, always timing. Bella closed the laptop. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to pause without reviewing, without responding, without adjusting. Just stillness. Not the kind Isaac had mistaken for passivity, but the kind that comes after preparation is complete. Across the city, Isaac Carter was likely still awake, still moving through his own version of the night, replaying conversations, reconstructing control, believing that what had happened outside the charity hall was contained, manageable. A moment that could be reframed, explained, dismissed. He did not yet understand that the moment had already been recorded, structured, positioned, not as an emotional reaction, but as part of a larger sequence. Bella had not needed that night to define anything. It had only confirmed what she already knew, that the system Isaac believed he controlled had never included her. And As legal processes prepared to move forward, as documentation aligned, as structures that had existed quietly for years began to shift into visibility. Bella Carter stood at the center of something Isaac had never seen, not because it was hidden, but because he had never known where to look. The empire beneath her silence had never needed recognition to grow, and by the time it would be recognized, it would already be untouchable. Bella turned away from the window, moving toward the bedroom with the same measured steps she had carried through every part of her life. No urgency, no hesitation, only direction. Tomorrow would not be loud. It would not be dramatic. It would begin with filings, with documents, with procedures that followed rules Isaac had never paid attention to. And by the time he realized what had begun, it would already be too late to change its course. Isaac Carter woke before sunrise. Not out of discipline, out of disruption. Sleep had come in fragments, short, uneven intervals, interrupted by the same sequence of thoughts, replaying without resolution. Conversations from the night before. The look on Bella's face. The moment she stepped away instead of following. It didn't fit. And what didn't fit, Isaac corrected. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, phone already in his hand. No new messages from Bella. That more than anything unsettled him. He stood moved through his morning routine without variation, coffee shower suit, but the rhythm lacked its usual certainty. Each step felt slightly misaligned, as if something had shifted just beyond his control. By the time he left the house, the silence inside it felt different, not empty, absent. He told himself it was temporary. At the office, Isaac moved quickly, faster than usual. He greeted no one unnecessarily, closed his office door, and immediately began making calls. "Mark," he said when the line connected, "I need you to clarify something for me." Mark Benson hesitated on the other end. "About last night?" "Yes." A pause. "It didn't look great, Isaac." Isaac exhaled sharply. "It was nothing. It didn't read that way. It doesn't matter how it read. It matters what it was." Another pause. Mark chose his words carefully. People noticed. Isaac leaned back in his chair, staring at the glass wall of his office. "People always notice," he said. "That's not the issue." "What is the issue?" Mark asked. Isaac didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to say it out loud, because saying it would give it shape. And once something had shape, it became harder to control. "She left," he said finally. Mark frowned. "Left what, the event?" "Me." There was silence on the line. "That's not what people saw," Mark said. Isaac's jaw tightened. "What did they see?" Mark hesitated again. "They saw you pull her out." The sentence landed heavier than Isaac expected, not because it was inaccurate, but because it had already been interpreted. "That's not what happened," Isaac said. "It's what it looked like." Isaac ended the call without responding. He didn't need Mark's interpretation. He needed alignment. And alignment required control of the narrative. He opened his email. New messages had already started to come in, not directly addressing the event, but circling it. "Hope everything is all right. Let me know if you need anything." Careful language. Indirect concern. Which meant the story had already begun to move beyond his control. Isaac began responding. Short, confident, everything is fine. Misunderstanding. Handled. Each message crafted to reframe, to minimize, to restore balance. But even as he typed, something else began to surface. Doubt. Not about what happened, but about what Bella had said. Something that doesn't involve you. The sentence repeated in his mind with increasing clarity. It didn't align with the version of Bella he understood. Bella didn't have things that didn't involve him. She didn't operate independently. She didn't make decisions outside the structure he had defined. Unless Isaac stopped the thought. Redirected. Focus. He pulled up the financial reports he'd been reviewing the night before. Numbers, transfers, discrepancies. The problem was here, not in Bella. He leaned forward, scanning the data again. The shortfall hadn't corrected. If anything, it had widened. A transfer he didn't fully remember authorizing. A line of credit extended further than expected. Timing that didn't match his projections. Isaac closed the file, opened another, then another. The pattern was there. He just needed to control it. His phone rang, unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Isaac Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Daniel Reeves. Isaac frowned. I'm not familiar. You don't need to be, Daniel replied calmly. I represent Bella Carter. The room shifted, not physically, but structurally. Isaac leaned back slowly. What is this about? A formal notice will be delivered shortly, Daniel said. I'm calling as a courtesy. Isaac's grip tightened slightly around the phone. Courtesy for what? For the initiation of legal separation parameters. The words were precise, deliberate. Isaac felt something cold move through his chest. That's not happening, he said. It already has, Daniel replied. Isaac stood. This is a misunderstanding. No, Daniel said evenly. It's a sequence. Isaac didn't respond, because he didn't understand. And not understanding was not something he tolerated. What exactly do you think you're doing? He asked. Protecting my client, Daniel said. Isaac laughed, once short and sharp. From what? There was a pause. Then, from exposure. The word landed differently. Isaac's mind moved quickly. Exposure. Financial, legal, personal. You don't have a case, he said. Daniel didn't argue. You'll receive documentation, he said. I recommend you review it with counsel before responding. Isaac's voice hardened. I don't need counsel. That would be unwise. The line went quiet, then disconnected. Isaac stood still in the center of his office. For the first time that morning, he didn't know what to do next, not because he lacked options, but because he lacked information. And without information, control was impossible. His phone buzzed again. A message this time. From Bella. He opened it immediately. It was short. Please direct all communication through counsel. No explanation, no emotion, no opening. Isaac stared at the screen, waiting for something else. Nothing came. He typed a response, deleted it, typed again, deleted again. There was no version of the message that restored the structure he needed, because the structure had changed, and he hadn't seen it happen. Across the city, Bella Carter sat at a table beside Rachel Stein. Documents spread in front of them, aligned, numbered, prepared. Rachel reviewed the final page. Once this is filed, she said, everything moves forward, whether he agrees or not. Bella nodded. I understand. Rachel looked at her. Any hesitation? Bella considered the question. Not emotionally, structurally. No. Rachel nodded once, then signed. The pen moved cleanly across the paper. No pause, no correction. Bella followed. Her signature was steady, uncomplicated, final. Rachel closed the folder. It's in motion, she said. Bella didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because motion had never been the issue. Direction had. And now direction was fixed. Across town, Isaac Carter sat in his office staring at a screen filled with numbers that no longer made sense. Holding a phone that no longer gave him access, surrounded by a narrative he could no longer control. Still believing somewhere beneath the rising pressure that this was something he could manage. He was wrong. Because what had begun was not an argument, not a misunderstanding, not a moment. It was a process. And processes, once set correctly, do not stop for denial. By mid-morning, Isaac Carter's inbox no longer felt like a tool. It felt like a record. Messages continued to arrive not in waves, but in steady, controlled intervals. Each one carefully worded. Each one avoiding direct confrontation while acknowledging that something had shifted. He read them all. He responded to some. But for the first time in years, Isaac could not predict how his responses would be received, because he no longer understood what the situation actually was. At 10:12 a.m., the formal notice arrived. Not by email, by courier. The envelope was plain, unbranded, delivered with a signature requirement. Isaac hesitated before opening it, not because he was unsure of its contents, but because he understood instinctively that once opened, whatever was inside would define the next phase. He broke the seal. Inside documents, structured, numbered, precise. He scanned the first page, notice of legal separation parameters. The language was formal, controlled, absent of emotion. He turned the page, then the next, and then he stopped. Email excerpts, printed, time-stamped, highlighted. Isaac's breath slowed. He recognized them immediately, not because they were recent, but because they were careless. A chain of messages he had sent weeks earlier, late at night, under pressure, assuming the audience was limited. He read the first highlighted line. Bella doesn't need access to anything. She wouldn't understand it anyway. Below it, another, I'll manage the accounts. It's cleaner if everything runs through me. And then, she doesn't contribute. This is just how it works. The words were not new. He had said them before, spoken them, written them, believed them. But seeing them here extracted, isolated, positioned within a legal framework, changed their weight. He flipped to the next section. More emails, different tone, less controlled. We can move the funds temporarily. No one will notice. If it stabilizes, we'll shift it back before anyone looks closely. Timing matters more than structure right now. Isaac's jaw tightened. That wasn't the full context. That wasn't how it had been meant. But intent didn't matter anymore, because the emails didn't explain. They demonstrated. And demonstration in this format was difficult to argue against. He dropped the papers onto his desk and stood up abruptly. This was manipulation. Selective framing. Out of context. It had to be. He reached for his phone, scrolled to Bella's name, stopped. Her message remained at the top. Please direct all communication through counsel. Isaac locked the screen, then unlocked it again, then finally opened a new contact. Attorney. He didn't have one. Not one he used regularly. Because until this moment, he had never needed to. Now he did. Across the city, Bella Carter sat in the same quiet apartment, reviewing a different set of documents. Rachel Stein stood nearby. Her posture unchanged, her attention precise. The email chain is strong, Rachel said. Not because of what it proves directly, but because of what it implies consistently. Bella nodded. He repeats the same assumptions, she said. Yes, Rachel replied. And repetition establishes pattern. Bella turned another page. The formatting was clean, minimal. Each email excerpt placed within context, not emotional context, but structural. Timeline, frequency, escalation. Nothing exaggerated, nothing added. Only what existed. And that was enough. Her phone vibrated. Clara. Board wants clarity. Can we confirm disclosure timeline? Bella read the message carefully, then placed the phone down without responding. Rachel noticed. You're holding them back, she said. For now, Bella replied. Rachel considered that. You're protecting sequence, she said. Yes. Rachel nodded once. Good. She stepped closer to the table, reviewing the documents again. There's something else, she said. Bella looked up. Rachel slid another page forward. Metadata. Bella leaned in slightly. The email chain expanded beyond content. Server timestamps, forwarding paths, access logs. These weren't just preserved, Rachel said. They were tracked. Bella understood immediately, not just what had been said, but how it had moved, who had seen it, when. Isaac had assumed privacy, but systems rarely functioned in isolation, especially not ones connected to corporate environments. Daniel secured this? Bella asked. Yes. Bella nodded. No surprise, just confirmation. Rachel closed the folder slowly. This changes the weight, she said. Bella didn't respond, because she already knew. Across town, Isaac sat in a conference room with a man he had contacted less than an hour earlier. David Klein, the man, had introduced himself. Corporate litigation. Isaac pushed the documents across the table. I need you to look at this. David didn't rush. He opened the file, read, turned a page, then another. His expression didn't change, but his pace slowed, which to Isaac was worse than any visible reaction. Well, Isaac asked. David looked up. When did you send these? He asked. Isaac hesitated. A few weeks ago. David nodded. And you understand these are discoverable? Isaac's jaw tightened. They're out of context. David didn't argue. That may be, he said, but context doesn't erase language. Isaac leaned forward. This is being used against me. Yes, David replied calmly. That's how evidence works. Isaac exhaled sharply. They don't prove anything. David considered that. They don't need to prove everything he said. They need to establish pattern. The same word, pattern. It appeared again, unavoidable. Isaac leaned back. This is overreaction, he said. David didn't respond immediately. Instead, he flipped to the final section of the documents, then paused. This is interesting, he said. Isaac frowned. What? David turned the page toward him. It was a single line, not from Isaac, from an external email, an investor communication. Brief, formal, and unmistakable. Confirmation of controlling interest held by B. Carter, effective prior to current valuation. Isaac stared at it, then looked up. What is that? David met his gaze. That he said is something you should have known about before this started. Isaac shook his head. That doesn't make sense. David didn't argue. Then we need to understand why it exists. Isaac looked back at the page. B. Carter, Bella. No, that wasn't possible. She didn't. She couldn't. He stopped the thought. Because for the first time, he didn't know what Bella could or couldn't do. Across the city, Bella closed the final document. The email chain had done exactly what it needed to do. Not loudly, not aggressively, but clearly. Rachel gathered the pages, aligning them once more. This is only the beginning, she said. Bella stood slowly. I know. Rachel looked at her. He's going to push back, she said. Yes, he's going to deny. Yes, he's going to try to regain control. Bella met her eyes. He won't. Rachel didn't ask why, because she understood. Control required information, and Isaac Carter no longer had it. Bella turned toward the window. The city remained unchanged, but the structure beneath it had already shifted, and the emails Isaac once believed would disappear into routine had become something else entirely. Not just words, not just records, but the first clear indication that the narrative he built his life on was no longer his to define. By early afternoon, the numbers no longer looked like numbers to Isaac Carter. They looked like questions, unanswered, unstable, unforgiving. He sat in his office, the blinds half closed, cutting the daylight into narrow, uneven strips across his desk. The spreadsheets remained open in front of him, but his focus had shifted. It wasn't about balancing them anymore. It was about understanding how they had become unbalanced in the first place. He clicked through account summaries again. Transfers he had authorized. Some he didn't fully remember. Lines of credit extended under pressure. Short-term decisions made to maintain long-term appearance. At the time, each action had made sense. Contained. Temporary. But now, viewed together, they formed something else. A pattern. Isaac leaned back, pressing his fingers against his temple. No, this was manageable. It had to be. He reached for his phone and dialed quickly. Mark, I'm in the middle of something. I need you to check something for me. Isaac cut in. Off record. A pause. What kind of something financial? Isaac said. Quiet. Mark exhaled slowly. That's not my area, Isaac. It doesn't have to be. I just need confirmation. Of what? Isaac hesitated, then said it. If funds move through a secondary channel temporarily, how visible is it? The silence on the other end stretched longer this time. Isaac, Mark said carefully, what are you asking me? I'm asking a question. You're asking about concealment. Isaac's jaw tightened. I'm asking about timing. That's not better. Isaac stood up, pacing once across the room. This isn't illegal, he said. It's structural. Mark didn't respond immediately. Then if you're asking whether it can be traced, yes, eventually. Eventually. The word echoed. How long? Isaac asked. I don't know. Depends on who's looking. Isaac stopped pacing, and if no one is, Mark didn't answer right away. Then why would no one be looking? Isaac ended the call, because he didn't have an answer. Across the city, Bella Carter sat with Clara Nguyen in a secure conference room, one that existed within the company's operational network, far removed from anything Isaac would recognize. Clara's laptop was open, multiple screens displaying structured financial reports. Not fragmented, not reactive, aligned. "Everything is stable," Clara said. "No exposure points." Bella reviewed the data. Not quickly, never quickly. Each line mattered. "Joint accounts?" she asked. "Isolated," Clara replied. "No overlap with corporate structure?" Bella nodded. That had been intentional, years ago, before Isaac's patterns had fully revealed themselves, before she had understood how deeply control influenced his decisions. "You've seen his records?" Bella asked. Clara hesitated briefly. "Through Daniel's team," she said. "Yes." Bella didn't look up. "Assessment." Clara's tone remained neutral. "He's been compensating." "For what loss?" Bella's hand rested lightly on the table. Magnitude. Clara adjusted one of the screens. Significant enough to require layering. Bella understood. Layering meant concealment, not necessarily illegal, but deliberate. "Timing?" Bella asked. Clara looked at her. "He's running out of it." Bella nodded once. No reaction, just confirmation. On the screen, a sequence of transactions appeared, cleanly mapped, each movement connected to the next. Not chaotic, not random, but pressured. Bella studied it, not as a wife, not as someone emotionally involved, but as someone analyzing a system under strain. "He's trying to maintain structure," she said. "Yes," Clara replied, "at the cost of integrity." Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. Bella leaned back slightly. Flag everything she said, no intervention. Clara looked at her. "You're not stepping in, no." Clara paused, then nodded. Understood. Because stepping in would change behavior. And behavior, in its current state, was producing evidence. Across town, Isaac sat in front of David Klein again. This time, the spreadsheets were printed. Spread across the table. "I need you to tell me this is manageable," Isaac said. David didn't answer immediately. He studied the documents, then looked up. "It depends on what you mean by manageable." Isaac leaned forward. Contained." David exhaled slowly. "It's not clean," he said. "That's not what I asked." "No," David replied, "but it's what matters." Isaac's patience thinned. "These are temporary adjustments." David nodded slightly. "That's what they usually are." Usually, David tapped one section of the report. "This pattern," he said, "it suggests intent." Isaac's voice sharpened. Intent to what? David met his eyes. "To delay visibility." Isaac leaned back. "That's not illegal?" "No." David agreed. "But it becomes a problem when visibility arrives." Isaac's hand tightened around the edge of the table. "And when does that happen?" David didn't hesitate. "When someone starts looking." The room went quiet. Isaac thought about Daniel's call, about the documents, about Bella. And for the first time, he considered the possibility that she wasn't reacting. She was proceeding. "What if this is already being reviewed?" Isaac asked. David didn't soften the answer. "Then you're behind." The word settled heavily. Behind. Isaac Carter did not operate from behind. He controlled timing. He defined sequence. He stayed ahead. But now, he didn't know where the front was. Across the city, Bella stood by the window again. Clara had stepped out briefly. The room was quiet. Her phone vibrated. Rachel. Bank records submitted. Review scheduled. Bella read the message, then typed confirmed. She set the phone down. Behind her, the screen still displayed Isaac's financial pattern, not as accusation, not as judgment, but as structure. Bella did not feel anger. She did not feel satisfaction. What she felt was clarity. Everything was aligning. Emails, records, behavior, each element reinforcing the next. Not because she forced it, but because Isaac had created it. All she had done was refuse to interrupt. Clara returned, closing the door softly behind her. "We're ready for the next phase," she said. Bella turned. "Not yet." Clara paused. "We're close," she said. "Yes," Bella replied. "But timing still matters." Clara studied her for a moment, then nodded, because she understood something most people didn't, that power wasn't in acceleration. It was in precision. Across town, Isaac Carter gathered his documents, stacking them unevenly, no longer concerned with order. Because order had already been lost. He looked at David. "I need options," he said. David met his gaze. "You have them," he said. "They're just not the ones you want." Isaac didn't respond. Because for the first time, he was no longer deciding between strategies. He was reacting to consequences. And consequences, once they reach this stage, do not negotiate. They unfold, exactly as built. The first time Isaac Carter heard his own voice played back to him, it did not sound the way he remembered. It was thinner, less controlled, stripped of the composure he believed he maintained even under pressure. The recording did not exaggerate his tone, nor did it distort the words. It simply removed the context he had always relied on to soften them. And without that context, there was nothing left to reinterpret. The audio file had been included in a supplemental packet delivered to David Klein's office just before noon. It arrived without explanation, accompanied only by a short note. Additional supporting material, relevant to timeline and pattern. David hadn't played it immediately. He had waited until Isaac returned from a brief, restless walk outside one that did little to clear his thoughts, and even less to restore any sense of control. "Before we continue," David said, gesturing toward the chair across from him, "there's something you need to hear." Isaac remained standing for a moment, his attention shifting to the laptop on the table. The screen displayed a waveform static and precise, as if the sound had already been reduced to something measurable and unavoidable. "What is it?" he asked. David did not answer directly. Instead, he pressed play. The room filled with Isaac's own voice. "You don't need to worry about her. Bella doesn't question anything. She just stays in her lane." There was a brief pause in the recording, followed by the sound of movement glass against a surface, a chair shifting. Then Isaac again. "It's easier that way. One person managing everything, less risk." The audio ended. Silence returned, but it was not the same silence as before. It carried weight now, shaped by what had just been heard. Isaac exhaled slowly, his expression tightening as he processed the words. "That's not," he began, then stopped. David closed the laptop halfway, leaving the screen dim but not dark. "It is," he said calmly. Isaac shook his head, more in resistance than disagreement. "That's a conversation," he said. "Private, informal." David watched him for a moment before responding. "It was recorded in a public adjacent environment," he said, "which changes how it can be used." Isaac's frustration sharpened. "Used for what? That doesn't prove anything." David did not raise his voice, but his tone carried a clarity that left little room for dismissal. "It contributes," he said, to a pattern. The word appeared again, as it had in every conversation since the documents had surfaced. Pattern, repetition, structure, each term reinforcing the same reality Isaac was still trying to reframe. He turned away slightly, pacing once across the room before stopping near the window. Outside, the city continued as it always did, unaffected, indifferent, moving forward without pause. "This is selective," he said. "They're choosing what to show." "Yes," David replied. "That's how evidence works." Isaac did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached for the back of the chair, gripping it briefly before releasing. "Who recorded it?" he asked. David did not hesitate. "That will come out if this proceeds formally," he said. "For now, it's enough to know that it exists." Isaac let out a quiet breath. He could recall the moment now, though, not with precision. It had been after a meeting, possibly at a restaurant or a lounge somewhere, that felt private enough to speak freely, but public enough that boundaries blurred. He had not considered being recorded. He had not considered needing to. Across the city, in a conference room that felt deliberately removed from any personal association, Bella Carter reviewed the same audio file. The sound did not surprise her. Not because she remembered the exact words, but because she recognized the tone. The assumption embedded within it, the quiet certainty Isaac carried whenever he spoke about her in environments where she was not present, Rachel Stein stood beside her, arms folded lightly, her attention fixed on Bella's reaction rather than the recording itself. "Do you want to include it in full?" Rachel asked. Bella did not answer immediately. She allowed the audio to play once more, listening not as someone hearing something new, but as someone confirming something already understood. "It's consistent," Bella said finally. Rachel nodded. "That's what makes it effective." Bella closed the file. "No edits," she added. "Let it stand as it is." Rachel made a note. "We'll align it with the email sequence and the bank records," she said. "It strengthens the continuity." Bella stood slowly, moving toward the table where the rest of the documents had been arranged. Each section was clearly labeled emails, financial records, timeline, witness statements. Witness statements. That was the next layer. Rachel followed her gaze. "They've started coming in," she said. "Not all of them, but enough to establish context." Bella picked up one of the pages. A brief account from someone present at Lydia's dinner. Another from a guest at the charity event. Descriptions that did not dramatize what they had seen, but did not soften it either. He held her wrist. She did not resist. It was uncomfortable to watch. Bella read each line without interruption. She did not look for validation. She looked for accuracy. "These are sufficient," she said. "For now," Rachel replied. "More may follow once the process becomes visible." Bella placed the pages back down. She understood what Rachel meant. Visibility created momentum. And momentum, once established, often brought additional voices forward, some measured, some less so. But Bella had no interest in escalation, only completion. Her phone vibrated softly on the table. "Clara, external inquiry increasing. They've noticed movement." Bella read the message carefully. Movement. Even without public disclosure, the internal shifts were beginning to register externally. Investors, partners, observers, people who understood systems well enough to recognize when something beneath them had changed. Bella typed a response. "Maintain position, no engagement." She set the phone down. Rachel watched her. "You're holding the line," she said. "Yes." Rachel tilted her head slightly. Even now, Bella met her gaze. Especially now, because this was the point where most people accelerated, where they revealed more than necessary, where they allowed pressure to dictate timing. Bella did not. She had built everything she needed. Now, she would let it unfold. Across town, Isaac sat down again, the weight of the situation beginning to settle into something less reactive and more difficult to ignore. "What else is there?" he asked. David opened another folder. "Video," he said. Isaac's expression hardened. "From where the event," David replied. "Entry and exit angles. Partial audio." Isaac closed his eyes briefly. He didn't need to see it. He already understood what it would show. Not because he remembered every detail, but because he understood how it would be framed. "How bad?" he asked. David did not answer immediately. Then carefully, "It's not about how it looks," he said. "It's about how it aligns." Isaac opened his eyes. The distinction mattered. Not appearance, structure, alignment. Everything pointing in the same direction. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "And what direction is that?" he asked. David met his gaze. "That you established control," he said, and she did not resist. The sentence was simple, but it carried consequences Isaac had not yet fully processed. He sat back slowly, the room feeling smaller than it had before. Across the city, Bella stood once more by the window, the documents behind her no longer scattered, but assembled. Emails, bank records, audio, video, witnesses. Each piece independent, each piece complete. And together, undeniable. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel relief. What she felt was resolution, not because the process had ended, but because it no longer depended on her. Everything that needed to exist already did, and everything that followed would proceed accordingly. The room where it happened was smaller than most people expected. There were no raised platforms, no dramatic lighting, no visible markers of authority beyond the quiet arrangement of chairs, a long table, and the presence of individuals who understood the weight of process more than the performance of it. It was not a courtroom in the theatrical sense. It was a procedural space, controlled neutral, deliberately uneventful. That was where outcomes were decided. Bella Carter entered without hesitation. She wore the same kind of understated clothing she had always preferred, nothing designed to attract attention, nothing that suggested effort beyond appropriateness. Her posture was steady, her pace measured. One hand rested briefly against the curve of her pregnancy as she took her seat beside Rachel Steen. Across the table, Isaac Carter sat with David Klein. He had arrived earlier, not because he was prepared, but because he needed time to adjust to a structure he did not control. When Bella entered, he looked up, not quickly, not obviously, but enough. Their eyes met for a moment. Bella did not look away. She did not hold the gaze longer than necessary either. She acknowledged it. Then she returned her attention to the documents in front of her. The hearing began without ceremony. A clerk confirmed names representation and the scope of the session. The language was precise, almost mechanical, designed to remove emotion from what would follow. This proceeding concerns preliminary matters of legal separation, financial disclosure, and protective considerations. No one objected. No one interrupted. The process moved forward. Rachel spoke first. Her voice was calm, even structured around facts rather than emphasis. "We are presenting a sequence of documented interactions and financial records," she said, "which establish a pattern of control exclusion and material misrepresentation within the marital structure." Bella did not react to the words. She had already heard them, already understood them. Across the table, Isaac shifted slightly in his chair, his attention fixed on the documents being placed before the adjudicator. David leaned toward him, briefly speaking in a low voice. Isaac did not fully register. Because Isaac was no longer listening strategically. He was listening defensively. The first set of materials presented were the emails. Not all of them. Only enough. Selected for consistency. Presented in order. Consolidating. Each one time-stamped, verified, aligned with the others in tone and content. Bella watched as the pages were reviewed. Not anxiously, not expectantly. Simply as someone observing a process she had already prepared for. Rachel did not elaborate beyond necessity. These communications demonstrate a repeated characterization of Miss Carter as financially dependent and excluded from decision-making authority, she said. Isaac leaned forward slightly. "That's not," he began. David placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Wait," he said quietly. Isaac stopped, not because he agreed, but because interruption in this space would not serve him. The next set of documents followed. Bank records, cleanly organized, mapped. Not accusations, not conclusions, just movement. Funds transferred, accounts layered. Timing that did not align with stated intentions. Rachel's voice remained steady. These records indicate a pattern of unilateral financial control and temporary reallocation inconsistent with transparent marital management. Isaac felt the language more than he understood it, because each phrase removed interpretation, left only structure. David leaned closer again. "They're not saying illegal," he whispered. "They're saying deliberate." The distinction mattered, but not enough. The adjudicator made notes. No reaction, no visible judgment, just record. Then came the audio. Rachel did not introduce it dramatically. She simply said, "We have a recording relevant to the established pattern." The file was played. Isaac heard his voice again. In this room, under this context, without control. He did not look at Bella. He did not look at anyone. He stared at the table in front of him, his hands still, his posture fixed. Because movement would suggest reaction, and reaction would confirm impact. The audio ended. Silence followed, not long, just enough. Rachel did not speak immediately. She allowed the silence to settle. Then this reflects the same assumptions present in the written communications. No embellishment, no accusation, just alignment. Isaac's chest tightened slightly. He could feel the sequence forming now, not in fragments, but as a whole. Emails, records, audio, each one reinforcing the next. not individually overwhelming, but collectively difficult to deny. Then came the video. David had warned him. Still, seeing it presented here was different. The footage was brief, edited only for clarity. Entry, movement, the moment. His hand on Bella's wrist, her stillness, the absence of resistance, the presence of witnesses. No sound beyond what the recording captured. No commentary, just image. Isaac watched, because not watching would not change what was there. When it ended, he exhaled slowly. Rachel did not speak immediately. Instead, she allowed the sequence to remain intact. Then she said, "This demonstrates physical direction in a public setting, consistent with the broader pattern of control." Bella remained still. Her hands rested lightly on the table. Fingers relaxed, posture unchanged. She was not performing restraint. She was simply present. The adjudicator looked up briefly. "Miss Carter," they said. Bella met their gaze. "Yes. Do you wish to add anything?" It was the first direct question addressed to her. The room remained quiet. Isaac looked up then, waiting, for the first time not to respond, but to hear. Bella considered the question. Not for long, just enough. "No," she said. Her voice was steady, clear, absent of emotion. "I confirm the accuracy of the materials presented. Nothing more, no explanation, no expansion, no attempt to persuade, because persuasion was no longer necessary. The documents had already done that." The adjudicator nodded once, then turned to David. Counsel David adjusted slightly in his chair. He did not rush. He understood the position. Limited, constrained. "We acknowledge the materials," he said. "We will require time to review the full scope before responding substantively." The response was expected, measured, appropriate. The adjudicator made another note. "Time will be granted," they said. "Interim measures will proceed as outlined." Isaac did not immediately understand what that meant, not fully, but he understood enough. That something had been set, that something would move forward regardless of his response. The hearing concluded without escalation. No raised voices, no dramatic declarations. Just process. Clean, structured, final in a way that did not need to be announced. Bella stood when it was over. Rachel gathered the documents, aligned them once more. Across the table, Isaac remained seated for a moment longer, not because he was unwilling to move, but because movement now required adjustment, and adjustment required understanding, which he did not yet have. Bella did not look back as she left, not because she was avoiding him, but because there was nothing left to see. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just resolved. Rachel walked beside her. "That was exactly as it needed to be," she said. Bella nodded. "Yes." No relief, no satisfaction, just confirmation. Behind them, inside that quiet room, the sequence had been established, not by argument, not by force, but by alignment. And once alignment reached that point, there was no returning to interpretation, only continuation. The outcome did not arrive as a moment. There was no pause in the room where someone leaned forward and declared a turning point, no visible shift that allowed anyone present to recognize that something irreversible had just occurred. Instead, it emerged the way most consequential things do within structured systems, quietly through documentation, through language that carried finality, without needing to announce it. By the time Bella Carter reviewed the updated filings that afternoon, the direction had already been fixed. Rachel Stein stood beside the table, one hand resting lightly on the edge as she turned the last page toward Bella. "These are the interim confirmations," she said. "Protective separation of financial exposure, restricted access to shared accounts, and temporary control assignments pending full resolution." Bella read the lines carefully, not quickly, not because they were difficult to understand, but because she had spent years ensuring that when this moment came, nothing would be left open to interpretation. "Everything aligns," she said. Rachel nodded. Yes. There was no emphasis in the word, no suggestion of victory, just acknowledgement. Across the city, Isaac Carter received the same documentation in a different format, delivered electronically, followed by a physical copy already en route. He read it standing. He did not sit. The words appeared clinical, detached from the reality he believed he was still part of. Restricted access, temporary reassignment, independent verification. Each phrase carried weight not because of how it sounded, but because of what it removed. Control, assumption, position. Isaac lowered the document slowly, his mind attempting to reorganize the structure he had relied on. This was procedural. It had to be. Temporary. It would resolve. But even as he formed the thought, something beneath it resisted. Because procedure, when executed correctly, does not rely on belief. It proceeds regardless. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then called David Klein. "She's overreaching," Isaac said as soon as the line connected. David did not respond immediately. "Which part?" he asked. "All of it," Isaac replied. "This isn't justified." David exhaled quietly. "It's supported," he said. "That's not the same thing." "In this context," David replied, "it is." Isaac turned away from the desk, pacing once across the room. "She's isolating everything," he said. "Accounts access." "Yes," David interrupted. "That's what protection looks like." Isaac stopped. This assumes intent. It recognizes risk. The distinction landed, but not in a way Isaac could use. "She's acting like I've done something wrong," he said. David's tone remained even. "She's acting like she has documentation." Isaac did not answer, because arguing against documentation required more than denial. It required contradiction. And he did not have it. Across the city, Bella sat in the conference room once more, though the arrangement of documents had changed. What had previously been separate files were now consolidated into a structured packet. Email sequences aligned with timestamps, bank records mapped to specific intervals, audio and video indexed within the timeline, each element placed where it reinforced the others. Clara Nguyen stood near the screen, reviewing a different set of materials. "The board is asking again," she said. "They want to understand whether disclosure will impact negotiations." Bella looked up. "It won't," she said. Clara considered that. "Because of the structure, yes," Clara nodded. "Then we hold." Bella returned her attention to the documents in front of her. Nothing here surprised her. Not the content, not the sequence, not the outcome, because none of it had been built in reaction. It had been built in anticipation. Rachel stepped closer, reviewing the final section. "There's one more piece," she said. Bella looked at her. Rachel turned the page. A formal confirmation. Not from the court, not from the process of separation, from outside, from the structure Bella had built years before. Verification of controlling interest and executive authority. "Bella Carter?" The language was concise, unambiguous. It did not explain how. It did not justify why. It simply confirmed what existed. Rachel glanced at Bella. "This will enter the record," she said. "Not as a claim, as a fact." Bella nodded once. "That's fine." Rachel watched her for a moment. "You understand what this changes?" Bella did. Not emotionally, structurally. "It removes assumption," she said. "Yes," Rachel replied. "Completely." Across town, Isaac sat back down at his desk, the earlier documents still open, though he was no longer reading them. He was thinking. Not about what had been presented, but about what had been implied. The line David had pointed out earlier returned to him. Confirmation of controlling interest held by B. Carter. He opened the document again, scanning for it. There, unchanged, unexplained, unavoidable. His mind moved through possibilities. Slowly at first, then faster. Bella didn't have no. That wasn't accurate anymore. Bella hadn't had. But that didn't mean she didn't now. He stood again, moving toward the window. The city stretched out beneath him, unchanged from the day before. But his position within it was no longer clear. He thought about the years, the conversations, the assumptions. Everything he had believed to be stable, fixed, defined. And for the first time, he considered a different possibility. Not that Bella had changed, but that he had never understood her at all. Across the city, Bella closed the final folder. Rachel gathered the documents. Clara stepped away from the screen. Everything that needed to be assembled had been. There was nothing left to add. No final statement. No concluding argument. Because the process did not require one. Bella stood slowly, her movements unchanged from the beginning. Measured. Deliberate. She placed one hand lightly against the table, not for support, but for balance. Then she turned toward the window. Outside, the afternoon light had shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the buildings below. Time had moved forward, quietly, without interruption. Rachel stepped beside her. "It's done," she said. Bella did not respond immediately. She watched the city for a moment longer. Then, "It's in place." Rachel nodded. Because that was the more accurate description. Not finished, not ended. Positioned. Behind them, the documents remained. Structured, aligned. Final in the ways that mattered. Across town, Isaac Carter remained standing at his window, the same city in front of him, the same structures surrounding him. But none of them belonging to him in the way he had once believed. He did not call Bella. He did not send a message. Because for the first time, he understood that there was no version of the conversation that would return things to what they had been. Not because Bella refused, but because what had been had never existed the way he thought it did. And what existed now required something he no longer had. Access. The morning Bella Carter left the apartment did not feel like an ending. There was no sense of closure in the air. No emotional weight pressing against the quiet space she had occupied for days. The rooms remained as they had always been, minimal, precise, untouched by anything unnecessary. Even now, nothing about them suggested that a transition had taken place. Because the transition had not been here. It had already happened. Bella moved through the apartment slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of intention. She did not rush the process of leaving. There was no urgency left to respond to no uncertainty that required her to stay. Everything that needed to be done had been done. On the table near the window, the final set of documents remained neatly aligned. Rachel had reviewed them the night before. Clara had confirmed the structural impact early that morning. Daniel had sent one last message, brief and conclusive. All positions secured. Bella had read it once. She did not need to read it again. Her hand rested lightly against her stomach as she paused near the window, looking out over the city that had for so long existed as a background to a life she had allowed others to define. Now it felt different. Not because the city had changed, but because she no longer viewed it from within someone else's structure. Behind her, the apartment door opened quietly. Rachel Stein stepped inside, carrying a slim folder. "You ready?" she asked. Bella turned slightly. "Yes." Rachel placed the folder on the table. "These are the final confirmations," she said. "Temporary orders are now fully active. Financial separation is enforced. Access points are closed." Bella nodded. She did not reach for the folder immediately. Instead, she let the words settle. Not because she doubted them, but because she understood what they represented. Not protection, not victory, completion. Rachel watched her for a moment. "You don't have to review them again," she said. "I know," Bella replied. But she stepped forward anyway, opening the folder with the same measured precision she had applied to everything else. The language was consistent with what had come before. Clear, unemotional, final. No room for reinterpretation. No space for reversal. Bella closed the folder. "That's enough," she said. Rachel nodded. "There's a car downstairs." Bella reached for her coat, slipping it on carefully. Her movements remained steady, unaffected by the weight of the moment. She did not pack a bag. There was nothing here that belonged to her in a way that required carrying forward. Everything that mattered had already moved. As they stepped into the hallway, the quiet followed them. The elevator ride down was uneventful. No conversation, no need for one. When the doors opened, the lobby appeared exactly as it had the night she arrived, controlled, anonymous, unchanged. The same man at the desk looked up. "Good morning, Miss Carter." Bella inclined her head slightly. Good morning. Outside, the air was cooler, carrying the early clarity of a day that had not yet fully begun. The car waited at the curb. Marcus stood beside it, opening the rear door as she approached. Everything set? He had asked. Yes, Bella replied. She stepped inside. Rachel remained on the sidewalk. If anything changes, she said, you call? Bella met her gaze. It won't. Rachel did not argue, because she understood. Not that nothing would ever shift again, but that the structure now in place would hold. The door closed. The car pulled away, seeing way none. Bella leaned back slightly, her hand resting once more against her stomach, her eyes moving briefly across the passing streets. There was no sense of escape in her expression. No relief. No visible release of tension. Because she had not been waiting for this moment to feel free. She had been building toward it to ensure that when it arrived, it would not require reaction. Across the city, Isaac Carter sat alone in the same office he had occupied for years. Nothing in the room had changed. The desk remained in place. The files were still stacked where he had left them. The view outside the window stretched across the same skyline he had always believed he understood. But something fundamental had shifted. Not in the room, in him. The documents lay open in front of him. He had read them more than once, not because he expected them to change, but because he was still trying to understand how something he had never seen had always existed. Bella Carter, his wife, the woman he had described repeatedly as dependent, limited, safe, now existed in a structure he could not access, could not influence, could not even fully map. He thought about calling her. The instinct appeared briefly, then disappeared, because there was no language left that would reach her. Not after the sequence that had unfolded. Not after the alignment of everything he had dismissed. Emails, records, audio, video. All of it pointing not to a single mistake, but to a consistent misunderstanding. He had not lost control in a single moment. He had never had it. The realization did not arrive with force. It settled. Slowly, permanently. Isaac leaned back in his chair, his gaze unfocused as it moved across the room. There was no immediate consequence pressing against him now. No urgent demand, no dramatic collapse. Only the quiet presence of a structure that no longer included him. And that, more than anything else, was what remained. The car carrying Bella moved steadily through the city, away from the apartment, away from the space where everything had been finalized. She did not look back, not because she was avoiding the past, but because there was nothing left in it that required her attention. Her phone rested beside her silent. No new messages, no pending decisions. For the first time in a long time, there was no next step to prepare. Only continuation. The car turned onto a quieter street, lined with buildings that reflected a different kind of life. One not defined by proximity to others, but by the space to exist independently. Marcus glanced briefly in the mirror. Same destination, he asked. Bella nodded. Yes. The answer was simple, but it carried direction. As the car moved forward, Bella closed her eyes for a moment, not out of exhaustion, but to allow the stillness to settle fully. She had not spoken more than necessary. She had not argued. She had not corrected. She had allowed everything to reveal itself. And in doing so, she had left without needing to take anything from the person who had once believed she had nothing. When she opened her eyes again, the city had shifted slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to reflect that she was no longer where she had been. And that was enough. The story does not end with a moment of triumph. There is no final confrontation where one voice rises above the other, no scene designed to reverse humiliation with spectacle. What remains instead is something quieter and far more enduring. A record of what happens when someone refuses to respond to injustice with noise, and instead answers it with structure. Bella Carter never argued her worth. She never stood in a room and demanded to be seen differently. She allowed people to believe what they wanted to define her within the limits of their own understanding. And while they did, she built something that did not rely on their recognition to exist. What ultimately changed everything was not a speech or a reaction or even a single decisive moment. It was alignment. Emails that could not be reinterpreted. Finalizing. What ultimately changed everything was not a speech or a reaction or even a single decisive moment. It was alignment. Emails that could not be reinterpreted. financial records that revealed intent without accusation, audio and video that required no explanation, and a legal process that moved forward, not because it was dramatic, but because it was correct. Isaac Carter was not undone by one mistake. He was undone by consistency, by the quiet assumption repeated over time that control did not need to be questioned. And when that assumption met structure, it did not hold. Bella did not stay to witness that realization. She did not need to, because the purpose was never to make him understand. It was to ensure that what was true remained intact, and then to leave. If this story stayed with you, if you believe that silence can carry strength when it is backed by clarity and preparation, you can stay connected here. You're welcome to share where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always interesting to see how far a story like this travels. And if you choose to follow along, you'll find more stories like this, quiet, deliberate, and built on the idea that dignity does not need to be loud to be undeniable.